Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, everyone.
Hello, doctor.
Good evening,
Hi.
doctor.
Evening, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam.
How's everyone tonight?
Alhamdulillah, good.
Good. That's good to hear. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, bro.
Happy New Year, Prof.
Happy New Year, Prof.
Let's hope and pray that this year brings some relief from our current situation, inshallah. Okay, so it's I think it's after 6 already, so I guess we can get started. So welcome, week 11, already week 11. Wow, only a few more weeks for the semester until we're finished. So I think last week I asked you guys whether you wanted to have some say in what kind of final exam you wanted, and then the format, and then the time, or the date actually, date and time. So did you give it any thought? Would you prefer an in-class exam or take-home exam?
Take-home exam.
Take-home exam.
Oh,
Reverse
everyone's take-home.
takeaway.
Okay. How many days would you like to have to do the exam?
1 week. How about a week?
A week. Well, it's not a comprehensive exam like you would take for your PhD. So I don't think I can give you 7 days. That's a bit too much. I can give you like 2 or 3 days. How's that?
3 days is
Okay.
better.
3 days is good. 3 days. Okay. Should
Thank you, Prof.
we try to identify some dates? Because in fact I meant to ask Hazik at the graduate student office about the exam dates, but I have a general idea. So let me just share I can just put up my calendar and we can look at the dates. Let's see here. Our last class is on the 26th, inshallah. So, and then the following week is rest week. And then I think the exams start the week of the 8th of February. So usually it's about 3 weeks. I think it's probably maybe 2 weeks. Is it 2 or 3 weeks? Anyway, let's just say it's 2 weeks from the 8th to the 19th. So hold on, let me share this with you guys. Okay, so if we assume that it starts on the 8th, exam week, or the exam period starts on the 8th, maybe it goes to the 19th. Oh, we got Chinese New Year in there too. In that.
Yeah, Spring Festival.
Oh, that's not good, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so ideally, what week would be best then? Before Chinese New Year or after Chinese New Year?
Before Chinese New Year.
Yeah,
I
before
think
maybe.
before.
Before.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
So that we can celebrate it without thinking of exam.
okay, so then let's just say the 8th to the 11th. If I give you 3 days, I'll give it to you like on the 8th, and then it'll be due on the 11th, right before. Or is that cutting it too close for Chinese New Year? Because Chinese New Year starts on the 12th.
Oh,
I don't know. It's fine, I think. But 12 maybe is the Spring Festival if. So yeah, I think it's fine.
How about this? How about I give you the questions on the morning of the 8th, and they'll be due and they'll be due like on the evening of the 10th.
Well, that would be better.
Yeah. So that's just
Yeah, that's great.
just about 3 days.
Okay. Agree.
Okay.
All right.
So let me put this in here. Final exam. All right, so from the 8th to let's say like 8. We'll start bright and early. I'll give it to you at 8 in the morning. Okay, until Oops, no. Okay. So just for my note, just so I can, later I'll add the details, but, okay, so plan on the 8th to the 10th for the final exam. All right. And then in the coming weeks, I'll give you the details. I'll work out the details in terms of format and all that. We look at the questions too. Okay. All right. So we'll tentatively say 8th to 10th. Okay, for final exam. And then you can
Okay,
celebrate your
Prof.
Chinese New Year in peace. All right. Oops. Okay, so that's done. So who are our presenters tonight?
Here, Prof.
Yeah, we, doctor.
Eric,
Chenchi here.
Bella, and
Yeah.
just the two of you?
Oh,
Yeah,
Chenchi.
I'm here, Pro.
Oh,
There's
and, okay. Jijin. Okay. So so tonight's class we're going to be focusing on youth work. And let me just where's my hold on one second. Sorry about that. Okay, so tonight we're going to be focusing on talking about youth work. So our presenters will be discussing an article by Trudy Cooper, who's actually a colleague of ours from Australia. So she wrote this this chapter called Defining Youth Work. So it's all about youth work practice. What is youth work and why youth work is important for young people in society, okay? And so maybe we're not that familiar with youth work in the context of Malaysia, but of course we do have youth workers in Malaysia. Anybody know who are our youth workers in Malaysia, for example? Anybody know?
teachers.
Okay, well, teachers, it's a good question actually, because there's in some countries they consider teachers to be youth workers of sort. If you define youth workers in a broader sense, okay, but there are actually professionals called youth workers. So teachers would not fall under that category. They're teachers, okay, but they do work with youth. So if you consider youth worker generically or broadly, yes, they would be youth workers. But in some countries, like in the UK, for example, they have a very fixed definition of what youth worker means, and it's an actual position. It's a profession, like social worker. Okay, like social work. Social work is a profession in many countries. Many countries also have what's called youth workers. Okay, so there's a debate in the field as to what actually defines or constitutes a youth worker. Okay, so in some places they consider anybody that really works with youth in any capacity to be a youth worker. All right. In other countries, they're much more strict about who is considered a youth worker. So that's one of the issues in the field. But in Malaysia, we don't have so many youth workers per se, but we do have, like, for example, in the government sector, we have youth officers. All right. So in the Ministry of Youth and Sports, they have a position, an actual position called youth officer, right? Pegawai Belia, you find them in every state in Malaysia. They would be an example of youth workers in Malaysia, okay? But we also have, in Malaysia, also have many NGOs. In NGOs, we have, of course, people that work with youth in different types of NGOs, all right? So they may or may not be, their job title may or may not be youth worker or youth officer, but they are, in terms of the work they do, they are youth workers, okay? So we're going to get into a little bit of the definitions of what is a youth worker and so forth. But it really depends on the country, okay? But in most Commonwealth countries, of which Malaysia is one, okay, Commonwealth countries, most have a youth work sector. All right, so most have in the government they have ministries of youth, like we have the Ministry of Youth and Sports. Other Commonwealth countries they have other forms of ministries of youth, right? And under that ministry they'll have officers, youth officers. Okay, so those are more or less the public or the government youth workers. Okay, so since Malaysia we have a youth Ministry of Youth and Sports, we have a very big youth sector, right? So it's important that we understand youth work, and youth work is something that at UPM we've done a lot of work on. We've done a lot of research on in Malaysia. Right now, I'm doing a project with it's a cross-national project with Malta, the country of Malta. Malta is another Commonwealth country, and we're doing actually a cross-cultural study, a cross-national study on youth work supervision. Okay, so what kinds of supervision do youth workers get in both countries? That's a study we have going on right now. So, so it's something that we've been working on quite a bit over the years, and we're trying to develop the youth work sector in Malaysia and to improve it and to make it more well known and make it more better understood, and trying to improve the quality of the work. Improve the quality of the work that youth workers do with young people. So that's some of the things that we've been doing at UPM. Okay, so are there any questions before we start or comments before we can hand over to our presenters?
Prof,
Yes.
I have a question that can youth workers be youth or yes?
Good question. Excellent question, Eric. Yes, they can be. In fact, you'll often find youth workers doing youth work. Youth doing youth work. Yeah, right. And it also depends on the age. Like for example, we did one study, and in fact, we already discussed Basuga. Sorry, I always get my undergraduate class and my graduate classes confused because some of the topics overlap. So I have to think back which class. If you remember the lecture on Basuga, the youth association in Sabah that we discussed, they would be an example of youth that do youth work, right? Because they're older youth, they're like in their 20s, some of them are even in their 30s, and so at that time they were considered youth. The time that we studied them, and they were doing a lot of youth work with younger youth, like youth in secondary school, teenagers and stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Because again, the definition of youth tends to vary. It tends to be quite broad. So yes, you often get youth doing youth work. Yeah. I don't know, what is it like in China? Is there such a profession as youth work? Or have you not heard of this concept before in China?
Yes, it maybe have related organizations, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, because I know like in Hong Kong, I have some contacts in Hong Kong, and they do a lot of, I know they do research on youth work, so I know that they have youth work. I'm not sure again the definitions and all that, but I know that Hong Kong is quite active in youth work. So I'm just not sure about mainland China. I don't have much experience there.
Prof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll
Uh-huh. We can't hear you. It's not muted. I don't know why it's. I don't know what happened to her.
Yes, Prof.
Yeah.
Yeah, in China we have a very popular model which called 3D model. I will share after the PowerPoint the slides in the
Great.
slides. Yes, very popular model in China.
Good. Excellent. Look forward to learning about China, youth work in China. Okay, so let's just hand it over to you, Eric, and you guys can get started.
Okay, Prof, can you let me share my screen?
Yes, I can. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, clear.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to everyone. And today we're going to discuss about the defining youth work. And firstly, let me introduce me and my partner. My name is Chen Qi, and you can call me Eric, and my member Jiaxin and Bella Zhang. Okay, please say hello to everyone, guys.
Hello.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Okay. Okay. Before I proceed, I would like to share a personal experience that related to youth work. During my bachelor, actually when I was about 18 or 19 years old, and I went to a remote area to support education as a teacher in a primary school.
Hmm.
Yes, my supervisor gives me that chance. Yes, and and I think it's a very unforgettable experience, and it's very useful because this job offered me a very quiet place that led me to explore my identity, my value, and I already experienced the making decisions, and as a result, my interpersonal skills and confidence improved actually, and I learned to think more and more about the consequences uh, of my actions. When I was young, I don't think too much. Uh, when the thoughts comes around, I do it immediately. I don't think too much.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of us didn't.
Yes, I think youth work is very useful, not only to youth, but only to everyone, but to everyone. Yeah. Okay. Let's proceed to our content. So, uh, what we're going to talk about, it is a very interesting article, actually, and which talks about the definition of youth and the difficulties, the benefits, and the models proposed by the predecessors, and also the transnational boundaries of youth work, and also the conclusion. This article costs us, a lot of thinking and consideration, and as a result, we can benefit more from this article. And when it comes to the first introduction, we can see, also just a second. Okay, we can see the needs of defining youth work and the difficulties of defining youth work, and if we want to see the difficulties differences intuitively, and we must see it from a international perspective. So the first section is about the need of defining youth work. In other words, a definition of youth work that delineates boundaries between youth work and other types of work with young people would have a number of benefits. It would make it easier for those outside youth work to understand and value what youth works do, and to support the conditions required for successful youth work, and would increase the likelihood that youth workers' roles, skills, and expertise will be publicly supported. In other words, the public may have doubts about the expertise, skills, and knowledge of most young people because they are young after all. So that's the difficulties. The article tells us to define youth work. It is impossible to take a simple operational definition of youth work. And for youth work, there's no similar institutional or contextual coherence, and no universally shared social familiarity with youth work practice. And youth work occurs in various institutional and contextual settings that appear dissimilar to observers. People who are called youth workers are employed by different types of organization, and contexts of employment are varied.
Okay, Eric, can you stop there? This is just
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
this is an important slide. as I mentioned before about the definitional issues with youth work, depending again, really depends on the setting. And you'll find so many articles in the literature about youth work that they talk about these definitional issues. What is youth work exactly? Who are youth workers exactly? In what settings do youth workers work exactly? You know, all these kinds of definitional issues. There's so much discussion about this in the literature. And so Trudy Cooper here is just giving us a sort of background to this kind of landscape about the literature on youth work. All right. And so it really does matter depending on where you are. You know, it looks very different in different places. And there's both pros and cons to that, you know. But the idea here is that it's important that youth workers can define what they do and can explain the relevance and importance of their work so that they can get support for it, right? And that they can get support for youth. That's really the most important thing. Okay, so it's a really important issue that pretty much every country struggles with. Okay. All right, Eric, proceed. You can proceed.
Okay, perfect. So under these circumstances, it is little wonder that core observers of the everyday activities of youth workers might see little commonality in the structure, activity, and purpose of youth work. So if you want to see the difficulties intuitively, we must say it from a international perspective. Under this perspective, the situation is further complicated because the boundaries of what is considered as youth work vary between and within countries and over time. Even in some languages, youth workers may have a title that makes no reference to youth. In addition, the rationale, purpose, methods, and forms of practice and the age range of the clientele vary between countries and have changed over time within the same country. So that's why in the end of this article, it suggests that youth work is a diversified occupation. In different countries, the model of youth work is developed according to different academic institutions expressing commitment and describing practice in different languages, although there are different models. So that what we can do is to find out the models proposed by predecessors and to find out a benefit in synthesizing diverse models. So that's the international perspective.
Yeah.
Prof, do you want to give some comments?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of an extension of what we just mentioned. So I mean, like I mentioned before, you'll find youth workers in different settings. You know, some work in government, some work in NGO. You know, in some countries they have youth workers based in schools, right? So it really depends. You'll find a lot of variation and diversity in how youth workers work and where they work. All right. Like in the UK, they have a youth service, which is a very maybe they've cut it back a lot recently, but it is a well-funded part of the government structure. And within that youth service, they have paid youth workers. They also have youth centers, right? So they have a lot of center-based youth work. So young people come to these big centers, they get involved in a variety of different activities, a lot of it non-formal education. And youth workers are there to sort of act as mentors, as guides. They teach, right? They do a variety of different things. Sometimes they counsel, right? So I'm going to show you after the lecture today by our friends. I'm going to show you a rather short video about the UK Youth Service, and you'll get a much better idea of what I'm talking about. All right. So it's a good illustration of what it's like. All right. So it's different, but it's important to understand that. Okay. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. So in a summary, in the introduction part, shared operational definitions of youth work that cross national borders are not possible. So the other way is to seek conceptual definitions of youth work processes that encapsulate essential features of practice.
Yeah, so it's just not possible to come up with a single definition of it. but there are some conceptual similarities that can help us
Yes.
to define what it is. Okay.
Yes. Based on the international perspective, I would like to share the 3D model in China. Actually, in China, this model is a more distinctive of use work, and it is a constructive idea and for the integration and reform of use work. The 3D referred to direct, develop, and devote. This model is based on Chinese use work, focusing on the key concepts of value guidance, value shaping, and value embodiment. And these three aspects refer to direct, develop, devote. For the value guidance, it is to guide young people to establish an overview about the world, their lives, the values, and the career. And the second point about the value shaping is to develop youth from three aspects: ability, occupation, and their happiness. They establish business training consulting programs to improve the ability of young people, and establish training courses to from technical skills, management ability, and through care for young people in difficulties and concern about their growth, to enhance their happiness. And the third point, value in embodiment, is to cultivate the awareness of young people's dedication to the enterprise through corporate culture and the establishment of youth groups.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes, Prof. Do you have some questions or comments?
Does anyone in the class have any questions? Anybody have any questions about this Chinese 3D model of youth
Yes,
work?
I just gave a brief introduction of this 3D model.
Yeah, I have many questions, but does anyone in the class have questions? Anyone? So the 3D model was created by, is it government led? I mean, I know China's a communist country, so a lot of things are sort of directed by the
I
government.
think is proposed by a researcher. It's based on our President Xi work on youth and youth work. Yeah.
Okay. And when it says value guidance and value shaping, the values are sort of the values of the country, or they're the youth's individual values? What is meant there by values?
Yes, I think all included. The values of their world outlook, yes, their outlook on life, and their own values, and also their overviews of their own occupations, and their opinions.
Okay. All right. Okay. And how is it implemented? This model?
I think it's widely used in the in China we have a vocabulary called Internet Plus.
Okay.
The Internet Plus means every kind of work can related to internet.
Okay.
So under this circumstance, the youth will get more information, more information from the internet, from their iPhone, from their phone, from everywhere.
Okay.
And so our president want the leaders, the managers of the company to give positive information and to guide the youth, also the work, the youth work group in their company, and this is adopted into their corporate culture.
I see. So it's embedded within the corporations, the different corporations.
Yes.
The companies.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. All right. Do you have more to share on it, or is that it? Will you be sharing more?
Yes.
about it? Okay.
I think for me that's it.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Okay. Well, it's something new. Yeah, it's nice to hear. No, it's good to hear. We want to hear. We want to hear different models from different parts of the world, from different countries, from different cultural backgrounds. Because of course, much of what's in the literature is from a sort of Western perspective, but we want to hear from, we want to hear other perspectives as well. Other approaches to youth work.
As you know,
So that's important.
in China, what we learned is all based on based on Marx.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah,
yes, what we learned.
Yeah, I'm very curious how that translates into a youth work approach and model.
Yes. So what we learned is just the dedication. The difference between Western countries and our countries maybe. Yes, we have a, we have maybe maybe we can dedicate. We can make more dedication to our work, to our family, to China. Yes, to groups. Yeah.
I see. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have anyone else have questions or comments? No one else? Okay. Okay, Eric, you can continue. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So when it comes to the part 2 models of youth work, we must firstly learn how to understand the youth work. The models and definitions of youth work developed independently in various countries. So that is why we must see the things from a international perspective, and responded to local conditions that were grounded in differing disciplinary perspectives. And youth work academics in various countries have used the schema and models to show how apparently diverse youth work practices are linked, and to differentiate between types of practice and informed by different values.
Okay.
So we have our earliest attempt in the UK, Butters and Neville, 1978, and they provided one of the earliest attempts to theorize the traditions with British youth work. They draw upon the sociology of education and distinguished 5 approaches to youth work, which is named character building, cultural adjustment, community development, and institutional reform, and radical paradigm, means self-emancipation. Actually, this was very influential in the UK until 1990s and influenced the language and the terminology of several subsequent models.
So what they're talking about here is that because as she showed earlier in the article, Trudy Cooper, that since youth work is hard to define, it's hard to describe, what academics have tried to do over the years is try to come up with sort of models, conceptual models that explain basically how different approaches to youth work can be understood. And so they've called these models of youth work. Okay, so this is one of the earliest ones, which was an actual, sort of theory of youth work, it's sort of encapsulated by these 5 main approaches. All right, so the 5 main goals of youth work, which is to build character, help young people to adjust culturally, engage in community development, right? So a sort of positive development of their community and society. Institutional reform, which is always a big deal in especially Western countries. Well, any really democratic country, institutionals are always trying to improve themselves, right? So reform of institutions. Then the last one, what is radical paradigm? Eric, can you tell us what radical paradigm refers to? Were you able to understand that from the article?
Based on my understanding, I think radical paradigm is more about to improve young people's personal and social development, and to let them to have a voice, influence, and place in their communities and society as a whole. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's good. I mean, I think you've got it. Yeah, it goes back to this idea that young people, because they're youth, are marginalized, right? So they are, again, this idea that that young people are adults, but because they're young, they are sort of marginalized from the main institutions in society. So they have very little say in what goes on. They have very little opportunity to have voice in decision
Yes.
makings around things that affect them, right? And so there is this model of youth work that says, no, we need to empower youth to have voice and to speak out and to be heard, basically, right?
Yes.
And to emancipate, basically become an individual citizen, an individual adult, right? No longer be a child in the eyes of society, but to be what they call self-emancipated, right? Be their own individual, their own person, and not being dependent on all the institutions in society. Okay, so it's this tension of young people as in between, in that liminal stage between child and you and adult. It sort of it always goes back to that. And these are the kind of the thing. This is actually a major theme we have seen actually throughout the whole course, and that's why I sort of started the course with this idea that much of what we see in terms of the lives of youth, a lot of the tension that's there is caused from this very basic reality of the modern world not really uh, defining who youth are, whether they're children or adults. They're in this liminal stage. In some cases they're adults, in some cases they're children, and all that. So it's this ongoing tension that creates all these things. So youth work is aimed at trying to liberate young people from this conundrum that they're in, right? And to free them and to allow them to be really truly adults in society. Okay, so it's also a sort of empowerment approach, but it has this idea of radical paradigm, self-emancipation. Of course, that comes from a lot of Marxist type of language, but that's I think the basic idea behind it. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Please ask questions if you're not clear about anything. Okay, Eric, you want to continue?
Okay. This part, please let my partner to proceed, please.
Okay, partner.
Hi, Prue.
Who's going, Bella?
Hi.
Oh, okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jejin.
Sorry, Prue. I have a question about
Oh.
the self.
So you're a presenter.
Yeah,
It's okay. It's okay.
Is a self emancipation is about to not bound by their own or the external rules and the regulations or something.
I'm sorry. What was the question? I didn't catch it.
I want to ask about the self emancipation. It's about to not bound by their own or external rules, or to improve the youth to break the rules, or
No. It's not no. It's not talking about breaking rules. It's really talking about trying to reform the rules. That's another role of youth work is often pitched as advocacy. Like youth, it's often referred to as adult allies or advocates for youth. So youth workers sort of facilitate young people trying to break down barriers, not necessarily break rules, but try to reform. And a lot of this is based in sort of the principles of democratic society. Is getting young people to be actively involved in the political process so that they can help to reform these different systems and institutions that they perceive as being sort of hostile and oppressive to young people, right? So it's trying to get them engaged in the sort of reform process. So it's not about breaking rules, it's about getting involved and trying to actually reform and have a voice in those different institutions, right?
okay, got it.
Yeah.
I continue the presentation.
Sure, go ahead, please.
This one is about the form of the informal educational. Have the five part of this. The first one is to focus on the young people. The post 90s or post 95s generation who are now the main force of the young people, so tend to be more warm and introverted, and do not to show their difference from the previous generation, and it seems like that they are not waiting to the communication with the different generation. So we should focus on the cultures interested and a lot of standing of the society, and often not easily expressed to the old generation. But for now, I think their cognition and the interest of the youth workers' life, the imagination and the expression of themselves are quite different from the previous generation. And the second part is emphasizing the voluntary participations and the relationship. The third part is committing to the association. And the fourth part is being friendly and informal and acting with integrity. The last part is being concerned with the education more broadly and the welfare of the young people. And we got the China have the continue to carry out the publicity and the education activities on the national unity and the progress, and the majority of young people publish and the achievement of nation unity and the progress in our city. So the, we are focused on the social integration of young people in relation states for the poverty alleviation.
Okay.
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were done. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, next page.
Sorry,
Eric?
Is this from the article, or is this in reference to youth work in China, or where are you referencing?
Yeah.
Because I don't see
from
this.
China.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't see it in the article. Okay. So this is the type of informal education that youth workers in China engage in. Is that what you're trying to show us?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this is like the Chinese model of youth work.
Actually, yes.
Is that yes? I didn't hear you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this is actually quite closely, you know, if you could draw parallels between other countries. I mean, I think Malaysia also has a very similar approach to its youth work. Yeah, it's much closer to this than it would be, say, for example, like the models presented in the article, actually. So again, there may be some reference there to Asian culture, you know, history, the sort of socio-historical aspect, right? But definitely I think there's definitely a cultural element to that. Yeah. Okay, next slide.
Okay. Yeah. Next slide is about the radical sociology model developed for the organization analyze. The first is both the details elements from the contemporary Irish programs, policy, and the institutional context. Number two is the differentiate between the youth program and the intent to fit young people into society and those that intend to bring about social change. Number 3 is the constraint programs that focus on the internal interpersonal change with those that focus on the internal. And the 4 is the capture the multi-fact nature of the youth work interaction.
Okay, is this in reference to figure 1.2 in the article?
Yeah.
That sociology of regulation diagram, is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So yeah, these are sort of different in this sociology of regulation model of youth work. They're showing the different ways that youth work is sort of conceptualized. So for example, there are, and like in step 2, you see there, it's not really step 2, it's more like type 2 or something. Differentiate between youth programs that are intended to fit young people into society and those that intend to bring about change. So like the previous slide is definitely, you can see the idea there, the philosophy there is to try to help mold young people into to be in harmony with society, right? To society's institutions and so forth, as opposed to an approach that aims to bring about sort of structural change in society, to advocate for young people and as I just spoke about with Eric just now. Okay, so these are two really different approaches to youth work. One is more developmental, educational, right? For example, preparing young people for the world of work, preparing them for the world of adulthood, acquiring competencies, et cetera, et cetera. The other is really about trying to bring about change. And, you know, if you look every day, we see now there's this real tension between these two because there's a lot of young people now that are involved in a lot of these change movements, right? Because they don't, you know, there's so many things that they're dissatisfied with, you know. For example, in many countries now, there's the issue of corruption. It's not just a Malaysian problem, it's a problem everywhere, right? And so young people see this and they want change in their society. So there's youth workers out there trying to bring about this type of social change. So young people involved in these kinds of social movements, for example, as opposed to those that are just trying to acquire the skills and the competencies they need to be successful in the world of work, for example. Okay, so these are two different approaches to youth work. Okay, it's a different model actually. All right, and then it says there step 3 or type 3. It's not really type; it's more like quadrant in the diagram. But focusing on programs that focus on internal or intrapersonal change. Okay, so sort of self-growth, change within the self, with those that focus on external or extra-personal change. Okay, so again, changing institutions in society or changing the self, reform of the self or reform of institutions, right? And now, what do you think is the emphasis is more on nowadays? What would you say?
Prof, I think maybe focus more on the interpersonal changes.
Interpersonal.
Yeah.
Inter or intra?
Interpersonal.
Okay, and so why do you say that, Eric?
Yes, because I think I just want to say the situation in China. I don't know about Western countries, because youth in China, they need to build their characters, and they need more confidence, and they need more life skills, like, you know, socializing, communication, because that is the youth in China like so they must need to how to live, how to work, how to achieve something. Yes, that's I think that's the youth in China need to do.
So would you say
Yeah.
that's more towards personal development and character building, or is it more towards this radical social change, critical social education, reform of society, reform of institutions. Which one do you think it's more towards?
I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. I mean, from the way you sort of said it, it sounds a bit more towards the personal development, I would say, approach, which also makes sense, I think, given the nature of Chinese society, probably. And yeah, I think also even in Malaysian society. But if you look at social media, for example, you see nowadays young people are very outspoken, right? Calling for changes and reforms and all kinds of things. So that definitely indicates that there is this consciousness about the need to reform institutions. But now you have, like in the West, you have something called critical theory, which is very much focused on the need to reform institutions. And in fact, it almost completely ignores the role of the self, of the individual in, for example, all the problems out there in the world, all the racism that exists, the problem is all the institutions. None of it is my problem. It's this idea that there's nothing, it's not the individual at all. Everything is the institution, the problem of institutions. Like in Malaysia, it would be like everyone blames the government for everything. Nobody looks to themselves as the problem, as part of the problem, right? It's always the government's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the government's fault, right? So it's that kind of idea. And I think there is definitely this sort of shift now where people are really sort of taking the focus away from themselves and they're placing it on institutions, right? And so this is sort of this idea, and I think it's very much influenced by Western sort of critical theory. It's gotten to a real extreme, like in the U.S. I mean, they have these real radical groups now that are just promoting all this idea that everything that's wrong with society is because of society's institutions and the leaders and power, basically, those who are in power. Nothing. There's no role for the individual in terms of addressing these problems. So this is definitely this is a model of youth work. These are two very different models of youth work, okay, that they're showing us here. All right.
So, Prof, I have
Yeah.
a question. So, based on what you said just now, so they use the youth in difficulties. So we how we can do some measures, to care for them. You said that it's not an individual problem. Individual.
Yeah. No,
not individually.
That's one model, one way of thinking about it, one way of approaching it. Yeah, and it depends which approach you subscribe to. For example, if youth are having problems, is it because of youth themselves? Is it because of their lack of, for example, their lack of personal development, their lack of character, of character building, or is it because of is it because of society? Is it because of government? Is it because of institutions? Is it because of schools? Is it because of lack of jobs, right? Well, I mean, in a lot of course, both are contributing factors. But there are, again, when it comes to youth work, working with young people, there are these different ways of working with young people. For example, a youth worker can say, okay, let's focus on building up young people's character and personal development by creating programs that will help them to do that, right? That would be one approach. That would be more towards the personal development and character building approach. The other can say, you know what, we have to take this to the leaders. The problem is policies. The problem is lack of opportunities, lack of jobs. The problem is that schools are bad, right? And that's another, a way of doing youth work. Or there's, you can combine the two. So these are just different. They're trying to just show us that there are different ways of doing youth work. There are different approaches. These are sort of two of the main approaches to doing youth work. Okay. And they go into a lot of the details and give examples in the article from different countries of how these things play out. Okay, any questions?
Clear, Prof.
Okay, so can we continue? Next slide.
Yes. This part is, oh, sorry, yeah. This part is from the article. Tell us about the Australia youth work welfare sector. This about the youth homelessness support and the youth addiction and the mental health service, employment service, crime prevention initiatives, school-based youth work, youth centers, youth participation projects, and street works, and recreation provision.
Okay.
And next.
So this is just an example of all the different types of youth work that go on in the Australian youth work. And like they said, there's many different, depending on the state, it varies because it's different in even each state in Australia. But from the welfare sector alone, you can see there's very different types of youth work that goes on. So helping young people who are homeless, right? Addiction and mental health services, right? So young people that are addicted to drugs, alcohol, etc. Helping young people find jobs, fighting crime or preventing crime. And often young people are the biggest, not only perpetrators of crime, but they're the victims of crime, right? More than anybody else. So how to prevent crime among youth. School-based youth work, like I mentioned, having youth workers in schools, doing youth work in schools. Youth centers, youth participation projects, right? I'm not sure about Australia, but it sounds like they have dedicated youth centers as well, like UK. And then there's something called street work, right? Street work is like youth workers that go out to the streets and they try to recruit young people that just sort of hang out on the streets and don't really do anything. In Malaysia, we would call it, just lepak, that kind of thing. So they try to go out and they recruit these young people and bring them into youth associations, youth programs, youth centers, etc. So they try to get them involved in organized activities. Okay, so as you can see, it's a variety of different types of work that they do. All right, so that's just an example. So that's why it's hard to define, right? You can see the variety and the diversity in the type of work that youth workers do. Okay. Yeah, any questions, comments?
Prof?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask, in most Western countries, the youth are recruited. Can they get paid or they can't get paid?
Youth workers.
Yeah, no, they recruit youth to work.
Yeah. Oh, sure, they do. Yeah.
They do.
Oh, yeah, many.
But in China, you can't. It's against the law.
What age are you talking about, Eric, when you say youth?
Under 16 in
Oh,
China
no.
against the law.
Yeah, no. Yeah, in most countries, it's. I mean, the age differs a little bit depending on the country. But yeah, it's around 16, 15, 16, same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, doctor.
Okay, next.
This part is about the youth work meanings. The practice of engage with young people in professional relationship and the primary constituency and the mandate given by them has a priority. And the young person are understand as social beings who lives and shape in the negotiation with their social contact. And the young person is deal with the holistically. And also I think youth work need independent exploration and practice. So we got the government need to establish a work system to adapt to the development of yours, to implement education guide.
Okay, yeah, so that's why youth work is often involved in non-formal education because youth workers provide a lot of different types of education that's like something like schools do not, right? So that's why it's often even referred to as social education. So, and this idea of holistic education, building their social skills, their social competencies, their citizenship skills, understanding what it means to be a good citizen, being involved in community development, right? Leadership skills, all those things that they wouldn't get so much in a formal educational setting. This is the kind of things that they get in youth work with you when they work with youth workers. So it's also referred to as, it says, a relational type of professional relationship. So it's really based on strong relationships between youth workers and youth, right? So as you can see, like from the example in the Australian there, Australian model there, you know, youth workers can work with youth in a variety of settings, but they're always working on trying to educate young people and build up their competencies in different areas, right? And this is the kind of education, again, that they wouldn't get in a formal setting. It's mostly through non-formal education, experiential education, training, and so forth. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Proceed, please.
This also related to the meanings.
Okay, I think we can skip this slide because we just defined it essentially. This is just another definitional slide. So I think we can just skip this and go to the next one. Okay, all right, yeah.
Also, this have two models in our article, a political model of the youth work and the circle of courage model. So this part have six treatment, reform, and advocacy, and the empowerment.
Yeah.
And a benefits of these models to highlight the context, political nature of youth work values, and this courage about right, social justice, equality, and the participation and the social inclusion. So discussion of the political values also clarifies different meanings and within the particular political tradition.
Yeah, so this one, I mean, she breaks down the model of youth work that is involved in this sort of political reform, like what we were just talking about before. She breaks it down. It's actually from an earlier writing that she did, but she breaks it down even further into different categories. I'm not going to get into the specifics. If you want to see, you can look at the table in the article. It's quite detailed about the different types, from treatment all the way to radical empowerment and stuff like that. There's no need for us to go into all the details. But for those that are interested in political models of youth work, you may want to check it out. Okay. But it's very nuanced in terms of all the different ways that, you know, youth workers do youth work from a political perspective, and the different ways that they try to get young people involved in political reform and political activities and so forth. Okay, so, but we won't go into it in depth. Okay, next.
This one is about the circle of courage model. From our article, the outlines of framework of youth workers focus on how youth workers can maintain positive social ecology and offer personal support to help young people flourish and overcome trauma. Also, both personal support and the social ecological support a young person's basic need from belonging, curiosity, mastery, and independence. And the circle of courage model to emphasize the importance of positive relation between young people and adults, and the importance of supportive social ecology around young people, including interpersonal dynamics between the young people. And the model has explains.
Okay, so this model, you sort of skip the part on PYD, the part that comes before this, which is about PYD. So positive youth development, which we've discussed already in class, is one of the models that youth workers also build on. Okay, so especially in some countries like the US, New Zealand, PYD is used in youth work. Okay, so and then there's this specifically there. She just gives the example of the circle of courage model, right? It's an intervention model, and this helps to build. It's a model. It's an approach to youth work that helps to build personal support, right, and help to meet young people's basic needs. All right, so for belonging, generosity, mastery, and independence. So those kind of outcomes are PYD outcomes, all right, positive youth development outcomes that we find in a lot of PYD programs, all right. And it's basically saying that young people need these types of positive, this kind of positive atmosphere, this positive supportive environment for them to flourish. All right, so it's based on positive relationships between young people and adults. And so again, this is more of the personality development, character development model. Definitely different than the political model of youth work, right? That we just saw. All right. And it's really grounded in those relationships between the youth workers and the youth, all right, and the young youth workers trying to develop these types of competencies and outcomes in young people. All right, so this is a totally different approach to doing youth work that has very little to do with political activism and reform and so forth. It's more about reforming and building on the individual youth. Okay. So again, it's highlighting the diversity in youth work practice that we see from different countries. So this is definitely very much in line with the Malaysian approach. If you look at go back to the Malaysian youth policy, we can see that there's the PYD approach is really what the Malaysian youth policy is built on, right? It's not built on a sort of activist political activism approach. It's definitely built more on a PYD approach, okay, and trying to provide supportive environments for young people to flourish. Okay, next.
The last part is the contribution of the circle of courage model. First is to emphasize the importance of social ecology and discuss how youth workers can influence the young person's social ecology directly through their work. And the last one is indirectly through their support for the development of benefit relationships between young people and other adults.
Okay, so this model sounds like what that we've already discussed in the class. 1 week we discussed a certain type of relationship. Do you guys remember? This sounds like what type of relationship? Who can remember? Okay. In one of the earlier weeks in the class, we discussed this type of relationship. Anyone remember? Nobody remembers? Uh-oh. Have to add that to the final exam. Final exam question. What kind of relationships are they trying to build here? Are they specifically referring to that we discussed? We spent a whole week talking about it. Nobody remembers? Uh-oh. Developmental relationships, sound familiar? Remember we talked about the four stages of developmental relationships: socio-emotional support, reciprocity, scaffolding, remember? Transfer of power. Okay, so that's what they're talking about here. They're talking about building these developmental relationships between youth worker and youth, all right? Providing them with that sort of supportive environment, right? So this is a relational approach to youth work. Okay, it's very, very, very much grounded on the developmental relationship approach. Okay, so in the article they talk about this. This approach is popular in North America, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Yeah, they all rely on this type of approach. So in very controlled kinds of settings, like residential settings, like residential care, right? Alternative educational settings, you know, like the Henry Gurney School in Malaysia, okay? Those kinds of places, they'll use this because in those kind of settings, youth workers and youth have very close relationships, right? They work very closely together and they spend a lot of time together so they can build these types of relationships. Okay, next.
Oh, my part is finished. So
Okay, thank you.
my thank you.
Yeah, next is me.
Actually, maybe we should take our break now since it's 7:15.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off, Bella.
Yeah, okay, no
But
problem.
I think we'll just take our break now and then you can finish up and then we'll finish up the class for today.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay,
So
okay.
All right, doctor.
see everyone back at 7:35.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So can we continue? Everyone back?
Okay, Prof.
Okay. Let's have Bella finish us up. Sorry, finish us up with the presentation. And then we can do our class activity. Bella, are you there?
Yeah, doctor.
Yes.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Let me. So it's clear. What? Yeah. Can I continue now?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out who's. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
For my part, it's about forming transactional boundaries of youth work. This is from the article.
So from all those examples she gave from UK, Ireland, Australia, blah, 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 now she's going to try to come up with some sort of framing of something that's transnational, something that's general enough to encompass all those different approaches to youth work. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. And several disciplines contributed to the conceptualization of youth work.
Bella, we can't hear you. I don't know why.
Oh, can you hear me? Now it's clear?
No, just barely.
Okay. Wait. So it's clear now?
It's very, very, very low. I can just barely hear you. Is that the same with everybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, can hear.
You were fine a minute ago and then, sorry?
Okay. Just escape once. Maybe some wrong with my.
Ah, there it goes. It's okay now.
Yeah. And
Okay, good.
I will enter. I will enter.
Okay, it's good now.
I will just be right back. It's good now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, and several disciplines contributed to the conceptualization of youth work practice in the models examined. These models and definitions share important similarities, but have differences in substance, emphasis, and language. A synthesis of this definition highlights shared characteristics of contemporary youth work.
Mm.
This is about the first one is a focus on young people's lives and their concerns, starting from where young people are. Young people as primary constituency, attending to their social connection, association, belonging, and the context of young people's lives, social ecology. Positive regard and the process for working through supportive and friendly relationships. A holistic approach to young people that includes commitment to informal education, an ethic of care and concern that young people should flourish, facilitation of young participation, rights, and social justice. And the last one is acting with integrity.
Okay, so if we could, as best we could, if we could come up with an international, transnational definition of youth work that sort of encompasses all the different models that we've discussed or that are discussed in the article, I think this is a really good effort to do that. So the focus of youth work is on the lives of young people and their concerns. Okay, so whatever issues they're having, whatever is of concern to them, that's where the youth worker starts. The youth worker doesn't dictate what the youth should or shouldn't be doing. It's more around helping young people to develop according to their interests, according to their environment, their situation, etc. So it's really starting with the youth. Okay, and if any of you have ever been involved in like social work training, that's also it's a very similar kind of approach. The helping professions tend to be like that. They're very much client driven. So in this case, the youth are the clients. So it's really driven by where young people are coming from. Very much driven towards social connections of getting young people associated, involved in organizations or organized activities, giving them a sense of belonging. Okay, so that's of course a very important part of youth development, and so that's one of the goals of youth work. And along with that comes building supportive and friendly relationships. Okay, and then again, this idea of a holistic approach to youth education. So a lot of it is informal education and as well as non-formal education. Okay, and I'm sure as you guys are all mostly HRD students, you should all know the difference between informal and non-formal education, right? What's the difference between informal and non-formal education? You guys should all know this.
I think informal education is just like students teach in school.
That's what kind of education?
Informal education.
Informal.
Informal, yeah, informal education.
What
And
students learn in school?
subject is about science, math, Chinese, in China, Chinese, English, something
Okay.
like that.
I
Okay,
think
well,
it's formal education.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
this formal. I want to say it's formal education.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
informal education is about what we learn, just like basketball, if we want to be a basketball player,
okay.
or something to develop other thing like dance, guitar.
Okay. Well, it's actually basketball, dance. They can be learned informally or non-formally. So for example, if you have a formal program, like a basketball camp, for example, that would be an example of non-formal education. But if you just go to the park one day and there's some guys playing basketball and maybe they're really good, and you just sort of watch them and you hang out with them and you play with them and you learn from them informally, that would be an example of informal education. Okay, so a lot of youth work is done both. It's both non-formal and informal. So a lot of it's just from interacting with the youth workers in an informal way. All right, so there's the informal education, but there's also non-formal education. They have programs, right? So any kind of programs that they do, formal programs, are considered non-formal education. All right, so there's both. Here it just mentions informal, but it's also non-formal. Okay, and so we mentioned also care and concern for young people, that we want them to flourish, okay, in terms of developing their competencies and so forth, outcomes, but also getting them participating in the democratic process to help have their voice heard and so forth. Okay, so those are both elements of youth work. And then acting with integrity, of course. It's a profession, and youth workers strive to be known as professionals, just like social workers, just like teachers, just like doctors, these sort of helping professions. So they have to act with integrity. Anytime you have a helping profession and you have interaction with clients, you have to have integrity, you have to have professionalism. So that's another important characteristic of youth work. All right. So I think she does a good job of sort of framing a general definition of youth work here. Okay. All right, Bella, please continue.
Okay, and for the next part, it's contention. When youth work is with transactionally institutional agreements at the diverse, and the rules of youth workers are varied. On some issues, there are strongly held differences of opinion. The first one is voluntary participation sorry for. Yeah. And the first one is voluntary participation and mandate from the young person are features of some types of youth work, but in a transactional context, these characteristics are not universal. For example, voluntary participation has been central to the United Kingdom youth work, but not in some other traditions. For example, social
Pedagogy.
Pedagogy is
Pedagogy.
quite different. It is quite difficult for me.
Okay.
And the second one is taking mandate from the young person is a defining feature of youth work. Certainly, it is a guiding principle in many contexts. However, other factors limit the capacity of youth workers to respond only to the mandate of young people. For example, legislation often requires youth workers to report sexual abuse, even when it is against the young person's wishes. Yeah.
Right. So ideally, youth work should be voluntary. So young people should engage with youth workers on a voluntary basis, but it's not always the case. In some countries, there are mandates. So for example, like sometimes a young person that's involved in some kind of juvenile crime or something, a judge or a court will often refer them to have, they have to be enrolled in some sort of program, and there's a youth worker involved there. So they don't have a choice, right? So it's not always going to be voluntary, but in many cases it is. But often it should be voluntary participation. So
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so next one, the commitment. Youth workers aim to, the first one is maximize their possibility for voluntary participation, but are aware of how a lack of alternatives may limit young people's real choice. Second one is respond to a mandate from the young person, but be explicit with young people about any limitations to their mandate exposed by particular youth works context. Because of the acknowledged differences of opinion on this issue, these two commitments are more contentious and may not be accepted by all youth workers.
Yeah. Okay. So again, it goes back to the issue of voluntary participation.
Did voluntary this one?
No, it's okay. Go ahead. You can continue.
Okay. Yeah, there's some differentiate youth work. Synthesize of these definitions differentiate youth work from most other forms of work with young people. For example, teaching and youth work can be differentiated through differences in focus, intellectual development for teaching versus holistic development for youth work. Differences in the curriculum, predetermined curriculum in teaching versus informal education responsive to young people's interest in youth work. Youth work can be differentiated from youth justice work through differences in goals, a narrow focus on prevention of reoffending in youth justice versus a broader focus of starting with the young person's concerns in youth work.
Okay, so sorry, can you go back to that slide for a second?
Yeah, okay.
So can anybody tell me, in your opinion, what is the difference do you think between a teacher and a youth worker in a school in terms of the kind of work they do? Who'd like to guess?
Yeah, maybe I can talk about it because now I do a part-time job, be a private tutor. So
Okay.
I think that maybe I think I'm a kind of a youth worker because except teach them about the subjects, you know, just math, because I learn math. I teach them math. I also care about their mental health. Sometimes encourage them to if one of my students, he like play guitar, and I encourage him to play it. So I think now he's more happier.
I see. So Bella, is your job description just to teach them the academic subjects like math?
Yeah.
Or is it also to help them to get involved in like other co-curricular activities like guitar playing, for example?
I think it's more with except math, I teach them something, talk to them more because
No, I mean that's the way you do it, but is that your job description, or is your job description just to teach them math?
I think my job description
It's just to teach them math.
No, also
do
talk
those
to
other
them.
things.
Yeah,
Oh, I
lots of
see.
things, because that is the work of the private tutor. Because
Ah,
lots of parents, they don't have time to talk to their children and every time, but they do concern about them. But sometimes, you know, some students in middle school, they don't want to talk to their parents.
Right. Yeah, of course. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, then definitely I would say you're doing more of the work of youth work, although it does have, of course, the element of the traditional academic teaching. And it goes, like you said, it goes beyond that and bridges on more holistic types of learning and self-development and so forth. So yeah, I would say that's definitely definitely practicing youth work. All right, good example. So yeah, so youth workers in schools, they do a lot of things, but like one of the things that they can do is, for example, in after school settings, they can provide a variety of different programs in after school, in the after school kind of curriculum mode. They can also get young people involved in community work, like maybe after school, they do projects in the community and stuff like that. So they do a lot of the non-academic types of education, but it's based in school. And it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because in school is where they have a captured audience, right? So you have the young people are already there. You don't have to gather them or recruit them. They're already there. It's a captured audience, right? So it makes a lot of sense to have youth workers there in the schools because they already have the young people there. Okay, so school youth work, that's one example. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay. For the difference about the boundaries of youth work, there are 3 other points of difference about the boundaries of youth work that are not addressed by this compound definition. Relates specifically to British youth work, concerns the relationship between youth work and the traditional indigenous practice with young people, concerns the relationship between youth work and therapeutic practice with young people. Therapeutic approaches are integral to circle of courage approach used in the United States and so on, and to social pedagogy used in parts of Europe and in parts of the United Kingdom. Consciousness raising and developmental group work have at different times also been part of mainstream youth work practice in the United Kingdom. For some youth workers, therapeutic practice is part of a holistic approach that supports the young person's flourishing. For other youth workers, therapeutic practice is perceived to be incompatible with informal education. This is not. It is noted as an area of potential disagreement.
Yeah, so she's just she's critiquing her own definition, the one that she gave just before. So she's saying there are some issues that are still not settled by that definition, and these are some of those outlying issues related to therapeutic approaches, related to well, mostly therapeutic approaches, but other related approaches. Because a lot of youth work is not based on therapeutic approaches. Like social work does a lot of therapeutic kind of work. Like, for example, if young people come with mental health issues, right, or they come with, you know, like suicidal thoughts and stuff like that, social workers are trained to literally address those issues with young people. A lot of youth workers, they're not. So that what their youth workers will often do is they'll often link the young person to a service in the community, like a psychologist or psychiatrist and so forth. Okay, but some will say, no, that is part of youth work. You have to be able to address these problems with young people. So there's some, again, it's this idea of disagreement within the field, depending on the setting. Okay, so just to explain that, yeah. Okay, next, Bella.
Okay, next is some I think conclusion. This conclusion is offered tentatively to begin discussion rather than to close them down. The writer have suggested that youth work is a pluralistic occupation. Models of youth work have developed in various countries based upon different bodies of theory and use different language to express commitments and to describe practice. I think this is just for the discuss part, because the writer think his definition is not so right. It's not a limitation. Just teach us to talk about it and to expand more.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very good attempt. It's hard. It's a hard field to define. Okay.
Yeah, so I feel that too.
It's very diverse.
Sometimes I always confused about my work, if it's a youth worker. Am I youth worker or not?
Bella, are you working in China? You're working in China.
Yeah, in China now.
So I mean, again, like your title, your job title is not youth worker, right? But it doesn't mean you're not. But it doesn't mean you're not doing youth work. You are doing youth work, right? And so this is, again, this is the issue, is that not all youth workers have the title of youth worker, but they're doing youth work.
Yeah.
And so this is the reality. And this is what often makes it difficult to define, okay? So, all right, so thank you. Is that your last, I'm assuming that's your last slide, is conclusion. Is there anything else? Do you have anything else for us?
No, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, group.
Thank you.
Prof.
Group from China. So thank you very much. Are there any questions before we move on? No questions. Comments? No? All right, so let me, now what I want to do is I want to show you guys a video about youth work in the UK. I'm going to show you about 10 minutes of this video. So it's a little bit, not long, but it's a little bit long. Okay, and then afterwards, I just want to have a brief discussion about it. But I want you, while you're watching this video, try to identify some of the elements that we discussed today from the article, from the reading. See if you can identify some of the elements in this particular example from the UK in terms of how the UK does youth work. And let's, after that, we'll just take a sort of poll, not a poll, but we'll sort of take a, I'll just ask you some of the elements that you found embedded in the example that's shown. Okay, so let me just share my screen here.
Youth Work Works is a documentary film exploring the history of youth work in the London borough of Newham. It started as a small project to explore what youth work actually is. Newham has a rich history of youth work taking place through the generations, something that's not always well known.
Why answer me these questions?
Oh, we're doing a film, can't see.
In making this film, we recorded over 50 hours of interviews and spoke to over 100 young people, youth workers, and even those who've retired. And they shared their stories.
Youth work is, well,
This is a $60 million question.
It's really.
I don't even know, to be honest. I think it's like, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's what it says, isn't it? Like, youth work is to work with youth.
I think when I went to university when I was 18, and I went there to a youth work course, I thought, right, they're going to teach me, this is youth work 101, you know, blah, blah, blah. And actually, as the 3 years went by, I realised that no, that was never coming. And you had to develop your own style of youth work. You had to work out what worked for you.
It's teaching young people skills of life, how to create their character, how to give off a persona, how to be confident, give them the tools to get out there and be the best that they can be.
The importance of youth work is we've got time to listen to young people, to spend time with them, not just to play games, sometimes to play games, because by playing games with them you can build up relationships and actually have a conversation.
I would say it's essentially about relationships between youth workers and the young people they work with.
I think that's the core of youth work. If you can't develop a relationship with a young person, then you're not a youth worker as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, it's fundamentally a family.
So as a youth worker, I always try and go back to when I was 15 or 14 and think, what was I going through and how can I create a space that enables young people to be free or to have a freedom, have a sense of agency and a sense of who they are to direct it for themselves. And that's what youth work means to me, or how I try to practice it.
The power of youth work is often quite subtle, and even in the relationship while it's happening, it may not look like much is happening. And it's the type of phenomena that in reflection you can look back and then be like, wow, especially from the young person's point of view. I've been in a situation where I've had young people come back to me and say that they've remembered certain conversations that for me was just conversation, but it's had an impact on them. And then there's obviously an ability to be a bit more calculated with it and say, I want to strategically introduce young people to doing this, this and this with the means to achieving something.
Coming from the East End, you had to really be able to navigate lots of quite difficult relationships, and actually the hub of Forest Gate was a safe place that lots of people could come to, no matter what your background was, whatever your context or creed or colour, and everyone knew once you were in the centre that was a safe place. And for me that was quite comforting in lots of the disturbance that was going on in and around in the area.
It felt like I had to be a part of this miniature culture that was in Forest Gate Youth Centre. Everyone was cool with everyone. The dancers were doing their thing, the ballers were doing their thing, the guys doing the music were doing their thing, and then you just had the other guys playing pool, table tennis, whatever. Like, it had an energy that was built for productivity, and that to me is what the energy still is with regards to Forest Gate Youth Centre.
For me, in terms of being a young person, so I started with Trinity Centre, and then I went to Ilford Youth Zone, and then we came to Forest Gate, got to know some of the youth workers in here. So for me, all these things was kind of new to me. I'm coming from Middle East, where we didn't have space that young people kind of go in to socialise or learn something new. So for me, when I used to come to do my dance classes on Fridays and Wednesdays, them 2 days used to be my favourite days, because it was the days where I can be anyone I want, and not that Zara had issues or problems or was thinking about all the responsibility down on my neck, you know, cooking, cleaning, looking after 7 kids. It was just me, music, and I'm taking part of the dance and I'm learning. And the youth work, I remember Kat was just on point. He didn't care I spoke, I understood. All right, focus, boom, 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 done.
Right now we can see a group that's using the dance studio.
She's just looking straight. So you don't need to look
down because you know the floor is.
I do a lot of professional work. And what I love is the fact that I'm able to go off during the day, work with a particular artist, and then in the evening be working with my dancers or my young people. And they say, okay, Ken, what have you done today? Oh, well, I worked with such and such. And then on TV, they're seeing that, but then, you know, in rehearsals, I'm physically there. It shows them that I'm just like them. And if I have the capability of doing it, and I'm there right in front of them, then they have the capability of doing it. And that's why, for me, it's important that I stay within the community to help push that, because we need more superheroes. We need more of that.
Hello guys, my name is Victor. With the youth workers, they want to actually help us in our future, you know. They want to benefit our lives. So what they're doing, I love what they're doing because it's actually helping. I'm more mature. They've always been there. They're always encouraging me. They make you learn new skills, and they always want to push you to the limit. And the benefits about that is that because I've got that I can pass it on to other people. People know that I love encouraging other people myself.
I still sometimes, forget myself that I'm actually not a young person in here. I'm actually a manager. Okay, Zara, think, focus.
Because I've done my work experience here, so I learned that you have to be two sides, you have to be professional, and you can't, if I see a friend, I can't just talk and be like, hey, what's good? You have to be professional.
Because I can relate myself to them, to this center, and I can share some of my experiences, it's for them, it's like, Miss, if you was a young person and you became a center manager, then anything is possible.
There's a lot of things that I can say. It's because you get to communicate with other schools and other people. You get to play games and have tournaments and go on fun trips. Oh, they're very nice and encouraging, and if you need anything help, they'll help you and stuff. There's no need to be shy because if you come here, you'll have a great time and enjoy stuff and be a happy person.
What's great is that no one pushing my son to do anything. It's constructed that way that he wants to come here and he wants to do things and he wants to get involved.
I believe when I first came to the youth centre I was immature and I didn't really understand what the world was about, and the youth centre and the youth workers have helped me progress and made me more mature.
With youth centres, they just play pool with the kids. Well, I don't play pool with the kids, so obviously I can't be a youth worker. No, we do so much more than that.
Luckily, shipment is right here at Custom House, so as members committee, so this is my second home here in this centre.
I look at a lot of them and they're the ones that people are not expecting to amount to anything, and then I just see myself in them because I wasn't meant to be who I am today. We all stumble because you're expected to stumble, you're expected to come off the rail, and that's fine, but it's about how we get back on track, and getting back on track is what my youth worker helped me to do. And so it's about the each one teach one, and it's passing on the knowledge.
Yeah, I enjoy coming to Shipman because there's lots of members to help me, and if I'm upset, someone can come and help.
And also give us the skills we need to get jobs and to become ourselves.
Yeah, it's changed me a bit really, because I'm normally the quiet kid who just when I was younger I was quiet. I didn't want to do anything. Just wanted to follow my friends. Now I'm just completely different. I just do my own thing. I have people following me, about asking me questions, doing things that I want to do, and I'm just more talkative really. You never would have got me doing this about 3-4 years ago.
People encourage you to do whatever you want in life, and it's very fun.
Even when you're having difficult times, they're always there, like I said, to support you and tell you the issues and the advantage of being a better person.
Hello, how are you?
They do little meetings and they help us with our CVs and that sometimes. So they say do this and then it'll be good on your CVs when you go to college.
To have a nice time and not to hang around outside so I don't get in trouble on that.
yeah, I've learned how to like at least make new friends and like communicate with other people and like have fun.
My greatest success is working with a couple of young people who were rebelling against the school system because they felt caged in, didn't understand, didn't feel the teacher had enough time for them, and seeing them come and get themselves a good job, go through training, go through college, and also help develop themselves while at youth centre and doing activities. And I think that's where youth workers come in. We're there to offer them support, to show them the direction, show them the different prospects, and teach them out of class.
What made youth work different from schools was that the curriculum was not an imposed curriculum. I always thought that the curriculum ought to be something that the young people had access to, but I did think there had to be a curriculum.
Yes.
You did have to have things on offer. You couldn't just
You
turn
had to
to
have a
me.
programme.
You couldn't turn to a young person who'd never had any options in life and say, "What do you want to do?" Because they didn't know. Yeah, they hadn't been very far. They hadn't perhaps been beyond the end of their road. So you had to say, "Look, there's this, and this," not just say, "What do you want to do?"
Going for our guidelines, and so far, thank you, Dexter, for the first one, which is to interact. Let's all get involved. What other things do you think we should all do together?
My belief is education is about enabling the youngster to themselves come to their understanding about who they are, what they are, and where they're going, and for them to be supported in achieving their full potential, personally, socially, educationally, in a way that is not compulsory. It's how they want to do it.
Youth work started in the 1840s in response to an emerging youth culture, often led by local people. Soon after, organisations formed with the sole purpose of providing services to young people. One of these organisations, the YMCA, has a college based in the borough where you can still study youth work today. During the 1940s, some research was conducted for the county borough of East Ham. Its findings were very similar with what happens today, showing that the essence of youth work was present then and still happens now. By the 1960s, fully paid, full-time youth workers made an appearance across the whole of Britain. But the growth didn't stop there. Newham acquired Fair Play.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there only because the rest of the video is just they talk a lot about that center. It's like a retreat center. It's a very old center, and the rest of the video is really about that. It's not so much about youth work per se. So I'm going to stop it there. But anyway, from the video, I think it's quite a good video. It's very interesting to hear the different perspectives from the different generations. Now you can see that in Britain they have, again, like I mentioned, they have this youth service and they have youth centers. So it's called center-based youth work, and having those physical places, those physical centers, as you can see, is a very important part of youth work, because like that one youth worker described it, he said youth work is like a family, right? And you know, families have a home, right? So families need a place, and so youth work that has a place like a youth center, obviously they can do all of their activities and all their programs based out of that place. And of course, having a place also builds a sense of belonging. It builds a sense of security, right? You have sort of fixed relationships, people that are always there. So it plays a very important role in the process. In Malaysia, we don't have a center-based approach to youth work, right? So we have youth associations, we have youth organizations, we have youth, as I mentioned, we have youth officers, we have lots of youth programs, but we don't have youth centers. Okay, so it's a very different way of kind of doing youth work. All right. So anyway, from what you saw in the video, let's just use our chat box on the right. I'm not gonna have you do anything in like Padlet or anything, but in the chat box, if you could just list down some of the things that you saw in the video that resonate from what was discussed in the class today from the article. Just go ahead and whatever comes to mind, why don't you just list it down? Take a few minutes to do that. Okay. So I'm just looking over some of your answers. So youth worker listens to spend time build relationship with youth. Yeah, that's a big one in this video. I think they're really trying to highlight that aspect that youth work is relational in nature, built on developmental relationships, right? So the older couple, remember the older couple in the video, they said you can't have youth work without relationship building, right? It's just grounded in that. It comes from that. Program participation is voluntary. Okay, that's another thing that they show quite well in the video. And again, this is the benefit of having a center, right? They can come in whenever they want, they can leave whenever they want. There's a menu of programs that they can join depending on what they're interested in. And of course, youth workers are also there to encourage them, right? If you're thinking about getting a job, maybe you should work on your CV. We have a program here to help you build up your CV, etc. So those kind of things. Very engaging relationship between young person and youth worker, like a second home, absolutely. And what's interesting about that is that, of course, they didn't mention this really in the video, but most of those centers, especially in the UK, their location is normally in sort of low income areas, right? Where young people don't have a lot of wealth and a lot of support from family and stuff like that. So they're strategically situated there, right, to attract those young people that don't have a lot of resources, right? And so that really, that's one of the reasons why they act as a second home, because those young people often don't have much alternatives or many options available to them. All right, youth are not being marginalized. Okay, I'm not sure how did you see that in the video? Could you elaborate a little bit? Okay, youth worker teaching young people life skills to make them confident, be the best they can be. Okay, not being marginalized by the adults. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, of course they're being embraced by the adults, not being marginalized. And there were some scenes there where they're doing some group activities, talking about how they can get involved, how they can get right, how they can participate and stuff like that. So there, you can clearly see there's that sort of advocacy role, trying to get the young people more involved in probably some kind of community issue or something. All right. Youth worker acts as a facilitator that encourages and provides moral support for youth when they stumble or have conflicts. Yeah, absolutely. And again, these are the kind of young people that they often have a lot of conflict in their lives. They have a lot of problems with family or problems with their neighborhood and stuff like that. So they need that support, right? And that's where the youth workers really play a big role. They help with social education. Yeah, that's a really good, Shoshana, that's a great, I was thinking about that actually when I was watching as well, and I didn't pick up on that previously, but actually, yeah, the interaction between young people of different ages is really important for social development, all right, and social education, all right. And if you notice in schools, how are schools organized according to age group? Very differently, right? Schools are literally organized by age, right? So young people in school, they more or less only interact with people their own age. Okay, and this actually, many studies have shown this actually stunts social development because you're constantly interacting with people at the same level as you, right? So we know that young people who interact with older people, it helps them to develop their social skills, right? And then older kids that work with younger children, they develop things like compassion, right? It develops those aspects of themselves. So social interaction between different age groups is a very important part of social development, right? And so that's where the youth center is very powerful as a developmental tool. Okay, in China, Michael shares with us, in China, there's a place called Youth Palace. Oh, cool, which is quite similar. Also helps young people to develop their interest, their character. All right. Yeah, it's they're really trying to drive that home about the relationship part, and that's really what Again, developmental relationships, the first aspect is that socio-emotional bond, right? After that, without that, nothing can happen. Okay, youth working creates space to let them feel free, help them to learn something new to help their future, right? I like that comment by the that older youth worker, I forgot his name, but the couple, and he said like, unlike school where there's a fixed curriculum, right? And we know at school, the curriculum is very fixed, right? Young people have no options at all. But he said even in a youth center and a good youth program, there should be some curriculum, right? You can't just, a young person that walks in for the first time that's had no experience, they cannot say, what do you want to do? Because they, like he said, they have no life experience. So how are they supposed to know? You need to offer them, need to offer them things to do, different alternatives, different opportunities, because many of them have no experience beyond their own neighborhood, as you mentioned. When I was working in a youth community and youth development NGO in the U.S. before I came to Malaysia. I worked in Washington D.C., which is the capital of the U.S. It's not a huge city, but it's a city that in the middle, of course, you have like the White House and Congress, right? All the government buildings, a lot of the national monuments and stuff like that. People come from all over the world to visit. Literally less than maybe 2 miles away, you have young people living in very poor communities that have never seen those monuments and those tourist sites, and they literally live probably less than 20 minutes away, and they've never been there. They literally have never been outside their neighborhoods, right? And that's the reality for a lot of young people living in low income areas. They just don't have those opportunities. So unless a youth worker offers them, like a menu, here we have all these things you can do, choose one, or get involved in something, right? Unless you offer them something, they don't know. They just don't know. So I think that was a really good point. Okay, friendly relations, share their experiences with young people. Okay, that's the reciprocity. Okay, so Zila, you mentioned youth workers share their experiences with young people and provide inspiration for them. Very important aspect of it, right? That is the reciprocity element of the developmental relationship. There's reciprocity. So it's not just, youth workers talking to youth, but youth are also sharing with youth workers, and they're learning from each other. Values, caregiving, emotional quotient. Okay, yeah, this cannot be learned through formal education. That's true. Okay. All right. So yes, you guys captured a lot of them. So Eric, sorry, you said actually for me, I think youth work is a very big concept. What we have talked about is like youth center therapeutic practice. That is to make youth more involved. But organizations like those that spread negative news, are they youth work actually? Eric, can you
Yes, doctor.
Can you elaborate a little bit about that? What do you
I just try to think more about some organizations that will spread negative news, like they sell drugs, they make a very a computer game that can let youth be addicted to it.
Yeah.
And this is yes, are they youth workers? I just wanna ask.
That's why a definitions of youth work are very important, right? So we can determine, what is youth work and what is not youth work. Clearly, I think the examples you're giving, they actually raise that issue in the article. If at the end of the article, she talks about, organizations that are youth serving, they serve youth, but are they serving them in a way that's considered, positive, right? And like the things you just mentioned are probably not. So if you look at the definition she gives there, I mean, I think what you're suggesting would definitely contrast with that definition of youth work. So it's clearly not youth work. It's not in the developmental best interests of those young people, right? It's actually harming them.
All right.
So if it's harming them, and then it's obviously it can't be youth work. But I mean, some of those things, I mean, like video game, like a video game club or something, that young people, they get addicted to it, but there is some positive elements to it. There's the sort of, they have a social network. There's a sense of belonging.
Socializing, yeah.
The socialization. So yeah, that's why some of them they're controversial. There are some that say, they're actually positive things. Others will say, well, look at, it creates negative outcomes for their lives and stuff like that. So yeah, there's some gray matter there sometimes.
Yes, there are positive things and also negative things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's see what else here. So yeah, thank you for all the answers, you guys. You hit on a lot of them, I think.
Prof,
Yeah.
can I ask one thing? I'm
Of
kind
course.
of I'm not so clear about okay, how to say how the youth workers know that they are qualified to get involved in the developmental of the youth.
Yeah.
You know, we're dealing of various kind of youth camps, so how they know they are qualified to join?
Excellent question, because we didn't actually it wasn't addressed in the article. And yeah, we didn't talk about that. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's often an issue, quite a big issue, because like, of course, in some countries, they have formal educational programs for youth work. So you can get a bachelor's in youth work. You can get a master's degree in youth work. Other countries do not. Like in Malaysia, we have UPM, we have the Youth in Development Diploma Program, which is a professional, an international diploma program for youth work. So you can graduate that from that program with a professional diploma in youth work, basically. So you can be a certified youth worker, at least at the diploma level, right? But we don't have a bachelor's in youth work program. In fact, we're trying to develop one. Our faculty is trying to develop one, but we don't have that. But other countries, they do have. Some countries do. Australia does. I know UK does. Like the US has some programs along those lines. But a lot of people, they don't have that kind of formal training actually. So they may have a background in like social work, but they've done social work training with youth, so they'll often get hired. Or maybe they have a background in teaching, so it really depends. But yeah, there's a lot of youth workers that are not technically trained in youth work. Yeah. So that's a great question though, because it's a big issue. When I was in the US in the 90s working, I was working for an NGO that was doing a lot of this work on developing credentials for youth workers, actually. And so we were involved in helping organizations to like kind of create modules for training youth workers and stuff like that. So yeah, so it is a big issue. It is a big issue. So because what constitutes a trained youth worker? All right, so I think that's about it. I'm looking at the others. These are all good answers. I'm just not reading them all out. So curbing social problems. Yep, that's also one of the idea. But again, it is also a very positive youth development approach in the sense that providing those young people with lots of positive activities, lots of positive types of competency building, fun activities, building healthy relationships, that of course, because of that, if they're engaged in that, then they're going to obviously choose not to, hopefully, get involved with social problems. All right, so that's very much a PYD approach. Yes, Pusat Rakamuda, that's true. Zila, yeah, we used to have Pusat Rakamuda. Some of them are still actually active. There are, and there's also like the International Youth Center in Cheras. So there are a few out there. Yeah, and we need more of them. We need a lot more of them, actually. I wish we had more because they can be, because we used to do a lot of programs at the International Youth Center in Cheras. And yeah, they can be really great places, especially if they're very active, if there's a really good staff of youth workers, they can be really great places for young people. So anyway, any questions before we call it a night? No? Okay. Well, thank you all for the feedback on the video. And so next week is week 12. I think who are our presenters for next week? I think it's the last week of presentations, right?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, week 13 and 14, I think, are are going to be filled in by me. So Gao, who are you presenting with next week?
Here, doctor.
Yeah.
Jiang Yu and Ma Yue.
Okay.
We are the last group.
You're the last group. Okay, great. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then I guess we will call it a night. See you all next week, inshallah.
Thank you, Prof.
All right.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Jumpa lagi.
Thank you, Prof.
Have a good week.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.